The Memphis Grizzlies notable moves include they signed Tyus Jones to a 2-year, $29 million deal. They signed John Morant to a 5-year designated rookie extension, $192.9 million. It will be 30% of the cap if he makes all NBA. That could escalate to then $231 million, I believe is the number we settled on. Yeah, $231 million as of now with the cap projections. They acquired point guard Kennedy Chandler, number 38, from the Spurs for the Lakers' 2024 second-round pick and $1 million in cash. They then signed Kennedy Chandler to a 2-year contract. They signed Coach Taylor Jenkins to a 2-year contract extension. They acquired Jake LaRavia, the number 19 pick, for Walker Kessler, the number 22 pick, and Ty Washington, number 29. So they traded 22 and 29 for number 19. They acquired David Roddy, number 23, and Danny Green from the Sixers for DeAnthony Melton, who had 2 years, $16.3 million left on his deal. They signed John Conchar to a 3-year, $19 million extension, fully guaranteed. They drafted Vincent Williams Jr. at number 47 and then signed him to a 2-way contract. And they signed Kenny Lofton to a 2-way contract. Notable exits: Jared Culver remains unsigned. They waived Tyrell Terry, and Kyle Anderson signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Grant, what grade did you give the Memphis Grizzlies?
So I gave him a flat C. And I think a lot of that, again, going big to small, like there was never really any doubt, but getting Morant locked down, great. I think, and normally you'd say, well, it's awesome because they did it a straight 5. There's no player option. I'm pretty sure. I think you said that. So like you've got your cornerstone. Of course, like there aren't a lot of guys his age that are as accomplished as him that are scarier to be committed to long-term just because of the injury risk and what's already happened injury-wise. And style of play obviously contributing to that, but whatever, that's all hypothetical. The other thing I really loved that they did was getting back. I feel like we spent a lot of this season talking about how, like, man, somebody is going to pay Tyus Jones because there just aren't any point guards. Like, the Knicks are going to give him $20 million a year, or like what, it seemed like there was a chance where he was going to be among the most sought after players, like full stop, and certainly among the most sought after point guards. So getting him back for 2 years at like reasonable money, especially since, like, if last year's any indication, he's going to start a whole bunch of games for them. So like that works for me. Then to the stuff I'm not as much of a fan of, losing Melton, I think hurts. And you sort of, I assume when we get there, we're going to look at what the Sixers did in the offseason and say, like, God, they got Melton for what? Like, he's going to maybe close games for them, or at least be a for sure rotation guy. So if you're going to think that way, you have to look at what the Grizzlies did in giving him up for Danny Green, who I assume is not going to play for the vast majority of the season, if at all, ever. I just, and that 23 pick, I don't know. That doesn't really do it for me. Losing Kyle Anderson for nothing. Reasonable minds could disagree on how useful he is, especially going forward. But now that Jaren Jackson is going to miss a bunch of time, maybe Kyle Anderson was going to matter a little more in your rotation. I don't know. It evens out for me. The thing that I think maybe some people will fault the Grizzlies for that I don't necessarily is we came into this offseason with, like, watch out because Memphis has potential to do something with cap space, and they're going to need to do it now because Morant's big number will hit down the line and your cap space won't be there. They got all these picks. They're just like, watch out for them as a big, and they didn't do anything consequential, which I think, looking at how far they advanced last year and the uncertainty surrounding Morant, like staying healthy, it kind of might've been time to do something if you're really aggressive minded about, like, we got to jump through this window because it's open a crack and that might be all the wider it ever is open. I'm still not going to penalize them because they just still have a ton of talent. Like, I think it's okay to be a little more deliberate. It does suck to lose 2 guys that, were helpful for a return that I didn't like a ton, talking about Melton and Anderson. So it's just an average grade. It's kind of a cop out. I am receptive to people being lower than that, though.
Yeah, so I gave them a C-. So I was right in lockstep with you. The bulk of this grade is because they signed John Morant to that extension and there's no player options. So that gives them the ultimate control over his future and their own, really, there then too. I did not like, and I like the Tyus Jones deal. Just, it's a 2-year deal. If you think it's a slight overpay at almost $15 million a year, just whatever. That's the cap is going up, and he was incredibly doesn't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
If he's hitting enough of his threes and then just the defensive peskiness he gives you, that's quality game managing from him. And just based off some of the time Morant has missed over the past few years, you're going to need to use him, which is also why I was kind of like, oh, you just gave D'Anthony Melton away. You could still fold Danny Green's salary into a different trade. He would help you if he was going to be healthy, but we don't know if he would be ready at all this season. And so I think what makes me most uncomfortable about their offseason, it's not even that they didn't take a big swing, because who are they taking a big swing on? Who would you have liked them to sign in free agency? That's part of all this. But they are banking, to me, way too much on not just internal development, but some of the new, like the new rookies making an impact right away. Like I enjoy the idea of, could David Roddy be like sort of this undersized big for them who's stretching the floor based off how many of his threes he hit during his final season at Colorado State? I mean, maybe, but he's also 6'5", and he had shot under 28% from three through his first two seasons at Colorado State. His free throw percentage actually dipped below 70% in his third season at Colorado State, while he was hitting 43.8% of his threes. This is all sort of happening on not negligible volume, but it wasn't super high volume either. So are you banking on him and LaRavia to make these impacts right away? Or are you banking on not Desmond Bane to be only as good as he was last year, even better? And then now became very high on Zaire Williams, but you've kind of decided with what you did this offseason that he's just ready to me. And that's also, this is happening with Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably going to miss some time to start the season based off the timeline for his return. And so to not diversify the front court rotation a little bit more, especially knowing, look, I know Steven Adams wasn't played off the floor the entire playoffs, but like knowing the issue it became against the Timberwolves, it probably would have made more sense to me to go after someone who wasn't like just more diverse than Adams or Xavier Tillman or Brandon Clark. And knowing that Jaren Jackson Jr. has dealt with injuries now in the past and is currently dealing with one, I feel like last season was not a flash in the pan. And I've also been lower on the Grizzlies for 3 years running than consensus. And they've just made me look like a fucking idiot each and every time. So maybe this will happen for a fourth year running, but they're not. I don't look at them and say, well, they're a team that's going to contend for the second best record in the NBA again. You have the Clippers who are going to be healthier. The Nuggets should be healthier. The Pelicans should be healthier. The Wolves got better. What if the Lakers just don't suck? Portland should be healthier, and they have an interesting team. I see a scenario where Memphis is not guaranteed one of those top 6 spots in the West. I'm not even sure if we went through it right now off the cuff, and I don't want to do it because I'll piss people off. I don't know that I would have them in my top 6 just yet. And I'm not saying that they should have been more aggressive then in trying to make a win now trade, but like something along the lines of getting rid of D'Anthony Melton, was that 100% necessary or even safe? And could you also have done something it's very much hypocritical of me to say all this and then not have names that are standing out, but like you couldn't have been the team that, because you had your mid-level, like couldn't have taken a look at Isaiah Hartenstein to diversify your front court rotation. I know you have a lot invested in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams. Adams is entering an expiring contract. And if not that, like you're definitely a team that I think could have stepped on the toes of some of these, wing debates. Like, why weren't you? I would have loved to have seen them attached to either of the Martin twins. Would have worked for them. They weren't even they weren't linked to Otto Porter Jr. Maybe he's more 4 than wing. That's fine too. Even wouldn't bringing back Kyle Anderson have made some sense, especially with this Jaren Jackson Jr. injury? I know he doesn't space your floor, but he gives you some ball handling in the front court as well. I'm just not I'm not on board with them being this trusting or having this much faith in their ability to, I guess, not even just develop, but it seems like have at least one of their primary rookies, make an impact. I mean, even just something why weren't you even couldn't you combine youth and flyer and inexperience with some entrenchment? Amir Coffey is just my example here. Mm-hmm. He signed a 3-year, $11 million deal with the Clippers. Not terribly experienced, but just having a secondary wing type guy that can already play, rather than hedging so many of your, so much of your immediacy to what are still bets, because Desmond Bane is only in his 3rd year. Zaire Williams is a sophomore. John Morant is really good, but how many games might John Morant miss? And yet you still get rid of Melton. I think there's a chance this team could be just as good, if not a little better, and maybe they wind up winning fewer games. I just feel like the likelihood of them actually being better than they were last season. Throw win-loss record standing in the West out the window. I just feel like it's lower than it should be after going through this offseason.
I agree with that. I think there's two guys that I think a ton is riding on, and Williams you mentioned, because even if it does feel like they're pretty comfortable with him being ready, but like ready in this case means like not just now, but like this is the guy that when Jackson is back, and we're talking maybe even 2-3 years from now, like Bane and Williams, like it's a conversation between who is like our third most important player, assuming Jackson is healthy and continues on, at some point marries like a high 3-point percentage with all the shot blocking and defense. Like he hasn't quite put that full season together. I don't know if Williams is that good. I think it's a possibility. I don't think he's going to be better than like a solid starter this year, right? Like that would be very impressive. And then Brandon Clark's the other guy, because now no Anderson, Jackson's out. He's kind of the only guy that, I mean, I don't know, maybe Roddy is going to be that trustworthy, but like if Jackson is getting major minutes, like you're losing the stretch that Jackson gave you, at least in theory. Like it's a hard combination with Steven Adams, and I think maybe there's going to be a lot of minutes there. Maybe Clark plays a lot more center, and I don't know. So he's got a suddenly much more important role. And this is someone that like has never really felt like a core, like, I think he's extension eligible, and it doesn't seem like anything is in a rush to get done on that front. So those two guys, Williams and Clark, are in like maybe a little more important roles than they ought to be. I don't know. I just think it might not even be their fault, but that the rest of the West got better. But I agree that like there's a scenario where Memphis is like a 50-win team, and they're fighting for the 7th spot or something like that, or the 6th spot. But also like the downsides are real, because
the combustibility, yeah, for sure.
Because think of like how they've handled Jackson injuries in the past. Like the torn meniscus kept them out for like longer than anyone's ever been out with a torn meniscus. And just add this injury to the pile. Like that's the more you get, the worse it is. And what are the odds they win as many games as they did last year when Morant misses his 20 games or however many it is? Like they're not going to do that. They're not going to do the 18-2 or whatever it ended up being at its high point, as good as Jones is. So yeah, the downside risk is very real, and moving Melton does not mitigate that risk. That exacerbates the risk, because you're just thinner at a position that was already tough. So yeah, I still go and C, but yeah, I feel the C- for sure. I can respect that.
The John Morant contract really saved them. And I do like the idea of Roddy and even LaRavia a little bit too. Just, it feels like maybe one of them can't be brought along as slowly as maybe they need to be. But this could be a flex by the Grizzlies that works out. We'll have to see. The next